As I tried the buttons on the panel, KK tried to pry open the elevator doors. But no matter how her bandages wiggled or snaked, she was not able to fit anything through the doors. And the elevator descended further and further down. None of the buttons I tried did anything. They didn't even light up. Maybe we should let it take us to the bottom? Then we can just press the button for the first floor? KK offered, and I shook my head while I looked around the car in desperation. No, that won't work. The emergency power supply for the elevator is designed to function for 90 minutes. We don't even know if we will reach the bottom wherever we are by the time the 90 minutes runs out. Every minute going down is 2 less minutes we have. Wait, wouldn't it be 1 less minute? I don't have time to explain the math to you. The important part is we need to get this to stop and head back up before we get stuck on an internal elevator, I said, just as the lights flickered again. This time, it lasted longer. In the corner of the elevator, just in front of me, was the skeleton. I could see it wearing an old-fashioned elevator operator uniform. No flesh was left on the bones, and they were as yellow as sunflower petals. The jaws had many missing teeth, and the sockets were cast down like it was ashamed or upset. But it was the chains that was the most disturbing part. The skeleton's right arm was chained to the handle that controlled the elevator. It was pushed down and kept there. But that wasn't the only chain on the poor skeleton's body. Where the skeleton still stood was a red square marking it as a place not meant to be approached. The only place that didn't have buttons. Both of its ankles were chained to the red square, but around its neck was a chain that connected to its neck, pulling the skeleton's head forward. If the skeleton had flesh, the chain would have forced every deep breath to end in choking. And even in death, the skeleton didn't have enough slack to look up, nor even look at anyone in the eyes. The name tag, dimly visible in the light, didn't show a name, but showed a familiar symbol. The same symbol painted over the elevator doors. The tower. This skeleton was the remains of the tower. My goddess, what did they do to you? I said, reaching my hand out, stopping my hand just short of the zygomatic bone that was where the tower's cheek was. Whoever designed this prison for the tower wanted them to suffer. Their power is forced to be used every second of every day, not given any rest, not given a chance to heal, removed from death, removed from rebirth, and removed from life. Not even given the ability to look at those who imprisoned them. This wasn't cold cruelty. This wasn't a system that didn't care. Someone wanted this arcana to suffer and went out of their way to make them suffer. This wasn't meant to draw as much power as possible. This was made to make them suffer. Drawing power was secondary at best. We need to break them out. Their power is what's drawing us down, I told KK, who turned her efforts from the door to the skeleton. Her bandages whipped like angry snakes, but no matter how much she twisted or squeezed, she couldn't even rattle the chains. They were too heavy and durable for her to even move. I watched the Killer of Kemet lift hundreds of kilograms of steel with a single hand. Now, even with both of her hands, she couldn't even move a single chain link. I cannot move it. How do we get them out? KK asked, just as the lights flickered again and the digital displays showed that we were over 100 floors down. The tower was missing. Both KK and I felt where they were, but we couldn't feel anything. So the cab was changing when the light changed. It wasn't an illusion. There has to be something we can do, KK said as she lifted her head up to the incandescent bulb. KK, don't do it, I said, just as she swung one of her bandages directly at the bulb, shattering it and leaving us in near total darkness. The only light was the ever-increasing digital numbers. I heard crunching and KK's apologies. In the low light, I saw no difference in the cab, and we either lost out our only warning system or our only way of changing the cab. You can move quickly without making brash decisions. Now, I need to figure something out, I told her as I tried not to let anger get into my voice. Logically, I knew she was trying to help, but that didn't change the fact that it may have made our situation much worse. But still, that gave me no excuse. Look, I'm sorry for snapping at you. We will need to find a way out, but in the future, let's think for a moment before taking action. That still doesn't excuse me for snapping at you, and for that, I'm sorry. Time spent thinking clearly is never time wasted, I told her as I closed my eyes and sat on the floor, letting my mind drift. This wasn't a problem I thought about before. Normally, I would be overwhelmed by emotions, but my mind was in a different gear. This was just a problem, and problems had solutions. If this was an Arcana's power that sank us down into the darkness, maybe another Arcana's power would get us out of this. I only had access to two of their powers, though. The Empress had some power, but none of that would help here, unless growing flowers or plants would stop us from descending. I chuckled at the thought, and I watched the numbers rise as we descended. No one really thought about how negative numbers were inverted from positive numbers, and how negative 150 was less than negative 100, even though 150 was usually bigger than 100. But life was funny like that. Context could change a victory to a defeat, a failure to a success, or a good decision into a bad decision. Wait, decisions. That thought process dredged up an expression I haven't thought about in a long time. There weren't good nor bad decisions, just decisions, and it was the consequences that were good or bad. I didn't actually believe in that since there were clearly good and bad decisions in life, but it did start a new thought process. Positive and negative numbers were both numbers. Sure, adding them to an equation changes the equation a lot, but if you don't understand the equation, then that is a good place to start. See how the numbers change the equation, and then you have a clearer picture of what the equation was. It was a very long shot, but I don't see how I could make the situation worse. Let me try something, I told KK, who was busy pushing on the walls with her bandages, trying to get them to pierce through. I slipped my hand into my pocket and pulled out one of the cards in my pocket. Even as I pulled it out, even though I couldn't see it, I could tell what it was from the way it felt. I knew it was the Hermit. I held the card in front of me and focused on the way the Hermit made me feel. Show me, I whispered to the card, and a lantern began to glow where the incandescent bulb hung only a moment ago. The Hermit's lantern, which, in addition to showing us what was around us, also had the ability to show us things from a more introspective perspective. It was a long shot, but it seemed like it may work. And it did. I could see the tower's skeleton, and I approached it. I had no tools, no powers, and I was certain neither of my Arcana cards could break the chains made to contain them. Still, though, I approached. I could smell dust instead of breath, and the chains smelled of rust and hopelessness. But still, I approached. Even when I heard KK call out, I still approached the skeleton. My hands felt guided by themselves as I grabbed at the shackles, and with a simple squeeze of my hand, it crumbled into dust. The metal was weaker than dried leaves in my hands, but only in my hands. Not understanding why, but understanding my next roll, I broke the shackle around her neck and then legs. And when the last of it crumbled into rust and dust, I looked up into the skeleton's sockets. Even though I could see nothing, I felt like they were saying thank you to me. You are released. Return to reincarnation, rebirth, and resurrection, I told the tower, as it too crumbled into yellow dust, leaving only the Tower Arcana card behind. I picked it up and dusted it off. The card felt weak, but also felt like it had a chance to heal and strengthen again. What do we do now? KK asked as I stood up and faced the elevator doors. I lifted my hand in a stop sign and the numbers stopped changing. I could now call upon the tower's power as my own. This power is mine now. Now, I believe a deal is a deal. Do you need the Emperor's personal chambers? I asked, and then pointed at a button on the wall. One that glowed, waiting to be pressed. You can take me to the Emperor's chambers. Right now? KK asked, and I nodded. The deal was a deal, and I intended to keep mine. Is this the only time you can do this, or can you also do it at a later time? She asked me. I can send you there at a later time too, but I thought you wanted your revenge. I asked her in KK's side. Just because I'm not killing him now doesn't mean I forgive him. But now I can access him at any time. I don't think. I think I'm going to spend some time planning it through, she said. I stared at her mystified before I nodded. I think that's a wonderful idea, KK. There's a lot more power we can collect, and a lot we can learn about ourselves first. Now, let's get back to the first floor, I said, pushing a different button as it led us up to the first floor. When the elevator doors opened, we came face to mask with Mr. Mad. He stared at us, and while I was thankful my card was put away, I realized how it looked. Turns out the elevator has power, I said, hoping to diffuse the situation. The drive to Strophia Stadium took a long time. Everyone's jobs at the tower were paused, and both KK and I were separated. My own personal cell on the bus was dark, and my right hand was chained to the wall. My phone was taken, and I was kept in the dark. Mr. Mad was quite upset. So he decided to make an example of me in front of the entire academy. There would be a fight in front of the entire school in the stadium. The point was to show all the students that the teachers were in charge, and it was because the teachers were so much more powerful than the students. Supposedly, if a student was able to defeat a teacher, it showed that the student was in the right. Honestly, to me, it felt like bullying through and through. Children asked to fight a teacher in front of the school was definitely something I was meant to lose. Normally, I would have been scared, but now I only focused on what was in front of me. I knew Mr. Mad was an accomplished fighter, stronger than a Tippecam, and he enjoyed setting an example. He wouldn't just beat me in a fight, he was going to drag it on and make it last. Supposedly the games were meant to end the moment one or the other was no longer able to fight. But Mr. Mad was still known for keeping a fight going, even after bone was showing and the person was barely breathing. But I did have an advantage. Mr. Mad didn't know what I could do. Everyone in the school, with the exception of KK, thought I was Tippecam, an exoteric or powerless human being. Still, though, I had to try it if I was going to succeed. I leaned back and looked up at the ceiling. KK was separated from me, and Mr. Mad said it was because I was the only one who did anything wrong. So she was asked to leave, and even without any eyes, I could tell she was judging her ability to fight and whether or not it was still going to be worth the inevitable consequences. But she saw one look from my face and she refused. I had an idea, and it was all I could do. But I knew why Mr. Mad refused to include KK in the wrongdoing. He didn't want to lose to KK. So if he kept it this way, then he looks magnanimous, but he also doesn't look weak by avoiding me. Still, though, I wondered deep in my heart, who did that fool? Well, whoever it fooled, Mr. Mad cared enough about their opinions to fool them. When we arrived, I was let out of the bus, and I was escorted out by 4 guards, 2 in front and 2 behind. They were large and dressed in black armor. As they escorted me off the bus, the 2 guards in front went to my sides as they escorted me forward. There was no risk of me running forward at this point. The first room I was escorted to was the quartermaster. The guards locked the metal door behind me. It was built like a bank vault. These rooms were built to hold in kids like Troll Lord. Little high priest like me? No chance. Before me, in an iron cage, was the quartermaster, an old man with red eyes and a cutting voice. What weapons do you desire? No guns, no explosives, he said, as there were rows of weapons behind him. Most of them were blades, clubs, and similar hand weapons. If you didn't see your weapon, you could request it, but there was no guarantee the quartermaster would get it for you. There were a lot of traditions in these weapon choices, hence why guns and explosives were not included. Not that guns or explosives were guaranteed to do any better against the teachers. Most, if not all, of the teachers were experts in villainy, and bullets didn't faze them. Still, though, I asked the quartermaster if he had what I wanted. After he heard my request, he nodded and withdrew a slingshot with steel ball bearings. The kind of slingshot that attaches to the wrist so it doesn't aim poorly. The pulling back power was strong enough to not just shoot your eye out, but to crack a skull. A lot of people think of slingshots as toys you give to pioneer scouts. They tend to forget about what David did with the sling. You sure this is what you want? He asked, and I nodded. This would be perfect, partially because of a tactical reason I wasn't disclosing to him, but mostly because of the naming significance. If you say so, but I have real weapons as well. he said as he handed me the slingshot. I checked the compartment, and there were plenty of ball bearings, and I had a plan. The door across the way opened, and I entered it. The waiting room. It looked a lot like every other waiting room in the world, but instead of magazines, there were pamphlets for local hospitals and bags of raw peanuts. Yeah, they knew what the people waiting in this room were going to need. I grabbed a bag to eat, and the other bag I put into my pocket while I watched the screen. On the television screen, the master of ceremonies spoke. He wore a white suit with a white tie, and on his head was a white motorcycle helmet with a glass tinted white to match the rest of his ensemble. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Strophius Stadium. We have a special trial by combat today. The accuser, Mr. Mad, accuses the High Priest of sabotaging his class's efforts for cleaning Temperance Tower. He has cited one disappearance, two hospital injuries, and the fact the High Priest was found alone in the elevator as proof. So he has challenged the High Priest to trial by combat. The accused, High Priest, states that he didn't hurt anyone, and he just pushed a button on the elevator, and that everything else that happened wasn't his nor anyone else's fault, with the exception of the cleaning company. But we aren't here to judge them by the strength of their arguments. No, no, we are judging them by their true strength. Mr. Mad has won over 20 trials in the stadium, one of the top 5 of any staff in Strophius Stadium. His known abilities include Herculean strength and even greater durability. He has no known weaknesses. In his professional life, he has been known to overpower bears, sharks, and even mammoths. He has a brilliant mind that is able to examine a situation from all angles, even as he is in the situation. There's a reason he's the head of the Economica department. Odds for him are very good. At that last line, the camera turned to the arena, and out stepped Mr. Mad. Mr. Mad removed his suit, and he was now bare-chested, showing his tattoos of eagles and sharks on his chest. In his right hand, he wielded a 2-meter-long sword that was meant to be wielded by 2 hands. A dull sword, but one that I knew was going to hurt, because 10 kilograms of steel swung at my chest was going to break every rib. The arena had an entirely dirt floor with no obstacles, no weapons, and no tools. Nothing that I was supposed to use to my advantage. That wasn't true of every fight. Sometimes they would have weapons or places to run through. Since Mr. Mad was the accuser, he had the right to choose the battlefield, and he chose somewhere he thought I had no advantage. Unfortunately for him, just because I was quiet and I preferred avoiding the fight, didn't mean I couldn't think tactically nor strategically. I smiled as I saw Mr. Mad turn to the cheering crowd and waved his sword in arms as he tried to get the crowd riled up. Even if the tactician, our master of ceremonies, was being honest about Mr. Mad's strength and intelligence, he was wrong about one big thing. Mr. Mad had a known weakness, at least known to me. Mr. Mad continued to pose for the crowd past the point where it got uncomfortable, and the door leading to the stadium opened for me. Hanging from the wall was a single device similar to a Bluetooth phone. It would allow us to speak to the crowd and be heard. It was theatrical, but necessary. I stood in the darkness of the doorway leading to the arena. A small red electronic sign told me to wait, while the tactician made color commentary about me. In the other corner, we have the High Priest, a first-year student at Agamemnon's Academy. No victories under his belt, no known powers, no known skills, and a GPA of 3.2 with a near failing grade in Mr. Mad's class. So hey, if you win this, you'll get an easy A, kid, the tactician joked, which caused a wave of laughter from the audience. A way of easing tension and distracting people from the fact it's meant to be my slaughter. But who knows, maybe this underdog pup might have a few surprises. That might shake things up. There's been a few times where first-year students have won. The comment brought a few murmurs from the audience, mostly among the student body. Those victories from students were so rare, everyone knew about them. But the last one was from over 3 years ago, and no one was counting on me to win. But the conditions were yet to be set. The rules of the arena: avoid lethal blows, where possible. Anything you carry into the arena you may use, and anything in the arena can be used as a weapon. A win can be captured in one of three ways. 1. Either combatant being unable to continue fighting for any reason is a win for the other combatant. In the event of both combatants being unable to continue fighting, it is declared a draw. 2. If either combatant yields for any reason, the other will win, if they accept the yield. If a combatant refuses to accept the other's surrender, the fight will continue until a combatant is unable to keep fighting. 3. If a combatant leaves or is forced to leave the arena, it is declared a victory for the remaining combatant. And of course, have fun and make it entertaining. The entire school is watching. The tactician finished as the lights dimmed in the seats. Silence fell across the arena, and I heard a beep in my Bluetooth before the countdown began. 5. I could see that Mr. Mad gripped his sword in excitement. Even through his mask, I could imagine he was smiling. 4. The number flashed across the screens around the arena, and I became aware of the sweat on my palms. I wiped my hands on my shirt. I had to be cautious. If Mr. Mad was going to make the crowd love him, I would make them hate him. 3. I gauged where the cards were in my pocket. The tower's power was still returning, but it wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be. I could open one path, but I would have to make it count. And make it count, I would. It was my ace, and people tend to play the ace right away, regardless of situation. Few ever thought about the fact that there's situations where an ace could be played better, or in situations where it was worthless. 2. That number flashed, and despite myself, I found myself holding my breath. I had thought about this moment a lot. I wanted to get back at Mr. Mad. I was full of so much anger about how he treated me and my classmates. But now wasn't the time to be angry. Now was the time to be victorious. 1. The number burned on the screens, and the crowd said it with the number. I reached into my pocket and broke open the bag of raw peanuts. The kind that were still alive and could grow if planted in soil. Mr. Mad didn't notice what I was holding. He was focused on my face. Good. Then he wouldn't see what I was going to do. Go! Rang through the stadium, and I grabbed a handful of the peanuts and I threw them towards Mr. Mad. But a single shell I put in my slingshot. I pulled it back and fired it all in one smooth motion, quicker than Mr. Mad could react. The peanut struck across his mask and broke, leaving the nuts on the ground at first. Mr. Mad was about to react in anger until he saw what I shot him with. And then he began to laugh. Looks like the high priest launched the first blow. A single shot of a single peanut shell. Mr. Mad has no peanut allergy, so I'm afraid it does no damage, the tactician said, and laughter ran across the stadium and from Mr. Mad. Now amused, he opened his arms out wide, inviting a shot, thinking I had nothing else to shoot at him. I smoothly put a steel ball bearing into the pouch as I pulled it back and fired it again directly at his forehead. He didn't even try to react as the ball bearing cracked his mask and snapped his head back. Mr. Mad held a hand up to his face, and when he pulled it away, it drew blood, and his mask was clearly cracked, revealing the skin underneath. I stand corrected. The high priest has both launched the first blow and drawn first blood. A first year drawing first blood is quite unexpected, the tactician said, while Mr. Mad focused on me. I held out my left hand towards him and I spoke through my headset. Mr. Mad, please, we don't have to fight. You started this and you can still end it before it gets ugly, I told him, and I heard boos from the seats, especially from the staff section. No one wanted a fight that ended too soon, and someone who gave up after drawing first blood was a prime example of cowardice in their eyes. Are you offering me your surrender? Sorry, little priest, but I don't accept your surrender, he said, his voice booming across the stadium. I kept my left hand out to him, part of my mind focusing on that, while the rest of my mind focused on this next part. All the cameras were aimed at my face, and I looked up, giving a wide smile that showed only madness and cruelty. An act, but one I knew how to do well. It was like a customer service smile, but with leaning forward, and the cameras showed everyone in the entire stadium the madness I was keeping hidden from them. You misunderstand, Mr. Mad. I'm not offering you my surrender. I am demanding yours, I said to the audience that was now cheering far louder for me than they did for him. Even though he wasn't trying to let it bother him, I could see he hated the fact they weren't cheering for him. Big words from a little guy. Show me what you got, he said, picking up his sword and eager to swing it. That was adorable. He wanted it to draw me towards him and he thought he could bait me. I aimed my next slingshot for his cheek and I cracked his mask again before he had a chance to react. A few broken pieces fell down along with his drops of blood into the brown dirt of Strophius Stadium. Next one goes through both of your eyes, and I can do this all day. Can you? I told him. My trap was already set. Mr. Mad charged forward, eyes closed as he ran towards me, and I ran towards him as well, ducking beneath his blade and making sure I ran past his right side. And when he realized he missed me, he reopened his eyes and turned to me. He stood where I stood only a moment ago. You're a powerless coward who resorts to cheap tricks to win, and you wonder why everyone hates you. In the light of true strength, everyone will see that I am right and that you were wrong. Just like always. No wonder your father abandoned you here, Mr. Mad said, trying to taunt me. He was certain words were going to hurt, and I'm sure in a way it did. But I could put things in boxes and deal with them in my own time. And besides, nothing he could say could be more cruel than what I said to myself every day. Tick, tick, boom. I responded, ending it with a snap, and a hole opened directly beneath Mr. Mad, pulling him inside and then dragging in soil to bury him. Dug by the roots of peanut plants, I grew with the power of the Empress. That I commanded, also with the power of the Empress. When people think about plant threats, they think about what they see above ground. They don't think about the root system underneath, which can be many times larger than what you do see. I let out a sigh with the thought that I had captured Mr. Mad with both dirt and roots. Shocked silence shook the Strophius Stadium as I spoke. Mr. Mad is now captured and underground. He is no longer able to fight. I believe that makes me a victor? I asked, only for the tactician to respond. High Priest, that isn't a knockout. I'm afraid you only just started round 2, he said as I felt vibrations underneath my feet. Somehow, Mr. Mad was still moving around, and I was certain he was going to get out. Quickly, I ran to the other side of the arena, in just enough time for Mr. Mad to burst out of the ground. He was dirty, angry, and hacking up dirt clods, but he was still in fighting shape. Die! He yelled as he charged towards me. I was out of peanuts, and there were no plants nearby I could use. So quickly I turned to the power of the hermit. It would grant me introspection and the ability to see the right way out of a problem. So it gave me the wisdom to dodge Mr. Mad's furious blows. But even as I ducked and weaved and avoided both his sword and his hands, I knew I couldn't do it forever. Knowing what to do to avoid being hit is one thing. Having the endurance to keep dodging indefinitely was something else entirely. Already I was getting tired, and Mr. Mad wasn't at all tired. Quickly I had a thought, and I used another one of the hermit's abilities when he had me cornered against the wall. A flash of bright light exploded from across my body, blinding Mr. Mad yet again as he wildly swung his sword. The sword, even dull, tore out gouges of concrete from the wall. In that split moment, I focused on the power of the Empress and made sure it was in my hand as I punched him in the gut as I ran by. He barely felt it, but I felt like I just punched a wall. Still, after running about 10 meters away, I focused on the Empress's power, while his eyes cleared and he found me again. What are you doing? Trying to grow a dandelion to fight me? Fight your own battles, he yelled at me. But I held my hand out to him like I did before. I didn't have to do this for long, but it had to be well timed. Is your stomach okay? I asked him and he laughed. Sorry, did you punch it? I thought a bit of dust hit me there, he said with a laugh that was shared with the staff of the stadium, but not the students. I wonder if he ever noticed or if he even cared. The power of the Empress gave me power over things that grew, mostly plants, but also fungi and bacteria. Even if it is beneficial, however, you can have too much of a good thing. So I could accelerate the growth of plants, fungi, and bacteria, but I would need to have had physical contact with them, even if it was just for a moment. Hence why I needed to throw the peanuts. But a fact people tend to forget is your body is full of microscopic life. Life I could command. All I needed was a touch. Thrive, I said with a wicked smile, and Mr. Mad collapsed to the ground, screaming in pain as the pain of his stomach being digested and the surrounding tissue was being eaten into. His small scratches across his body grew infected before everyone's eyes, and he screamed in pain as I took a step closer, my hand still out to him. Yield and I will stop it, I told him. A murmur rippled across the students' part of the stadium. No matter how strong Mr. Mad was, he couldn't survive his body turning on itself. An infection could stop armies and shatter nations. Never. I would rather die. He turned to face me, and I pulled back my slingshot and fired a ball bearing. It bounced against his right eye before bouncing against the ground and hitting his left eye. I'll make this simple, Mr. Mad. Your body is picking up new infections far faster than your immune system can fight back. Even simple bacteria are a threat to you. Both of your eyes have been injured. How many fungi and bacteria live in the soil? Do you know? How long do you think your eyes can handle this before they have to be removed? I wonder if the infection will reach your brain, I said with my cruelty showing. Mr. Mad, still in pain, took his hands off his eyes and laid them both on the ground, palms down, a show of surrender. Oh, looks like we have a victor. The high priest has won the trial by combat, the tactician said, clearly not expecting me to win. I stood, my hands shaking imperceptibly as cheers rang through the stadium. I looked around and I saw that the students were cheering for me like I won the Great War single-handedly. The teachers, I could see, were clapping politely, but I knew the message I sent. The staff wanted to show themselves as superior and always in the right. So, when one of their strongest battled against someone they saw as one of our weakest, and they lost, well, they won't forget it so quickly. But with victory in hand, all I can think of was one thing. I have won, and now I am going back to my room. Thank you, I said with a bow, which only drew another big cheer. I dropped the slingshot and the Bluetooth before I held out my right hand, and I made a movement like opening a door, and I stepped through the air. I entered my hotel room, and KK sat on her bed looking at the TV, which was streaming the fight. She saw me and she asked, "Are you okay?" I collapsed to my knees at that question, and I started crying. I didn't know where all that cruelty came to me. I care about everyone, and I didn't even have a rude thing to say. But in that arena, the only thought I had was how to hurt him more. I didn't keep him alive out of mercy. I kept him alive because I knew I could cause him more pain later. There was a thrill in seeing him squirm at my feet. There was joy in the cheers for blood and knowing I was the reason. The spotlight was addictive, and I wanted more. But that all scared me so much. It was so much like my father. I wasn't aware at first that I was being held by KK. Her bandages were soft and warm, and I was squeezed softly. You were defending yourself. You asked him to stop. He didn't. You had to force him to stop. It's hard, but even if it felt good, doesn't mean you have to let it define you. You choose how you define yourself, she said, and as my tears slowed, I pulled away and I saw what was laid on my bed. Did you get that for me? I asked her, and she shook her head. No, it was there when I got here. On the bed was a black dress. It was elegant with pockets in the side that was the right size to hold the arcana. The exact same dress worn by the golden-eyed child. Made in my size. I stared at it for a moment. Different tears filled my eyes as KK spoke up. "Why don't you try it on?" she asked. I picked up the dress, worried what she would say, but by looking at her blank face and warm pose, I felt safe around her. "Okay, let me give it a try," I said as I began to take it to the bathroom to change. "I have a few dresses packed that might fit you if you want to try those too," KK offered as I went to the bathroom to change. The memory of what happened in Strophius Stadium was still fresh, but now I had something else to do. I could process it safely and slowly. I cried alone in the bathroom as I got dressed. If you asked me, I couldn't tell you if it was because of the dress or because of what I did.